What's happening? Thanks for joining me as always. It is very much appreciated on this Monday. Let me just hit this quick business-wise. I appreciate every single one of you. Yesterday's live post-game podcast, which was supposed to be about the game and the draft pick, and then suddenly became about Jerod Mayo getting fired. That was our best podcast as far as the numbers go that we've ever had since we started in September of 2023. I thank you for your support. I thank you for watching. I thank you for listening, as I have since day one. I do not overlook the people who make this possible and have supported me, supported this program from the very, very jump. And I also appreciate all of you that have joined the crew over the past 16, 17 months. Means the world to me. And I'm telling you right now, over the next several months, it's going to be the busiest time at this channel. The next several months, we're going to be talking about head coaches. We're going to be talking about coaching staff. We're going to be talking about front office. We'll be talking about, of course, free agency and the draft. The next 5 months, buckle up. Buckle up because we're going to have an awful lot to talk about. And that starts with today, Robert Kraft speaking with the media. We will get to the latest reports on the head coach search a little bit later on in the program. But I want to start off with Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft met with the media today, and his son Jonathan was not there, from what I understand. I don't know if he was in the crowd where the journalists were, but it certainly seemed like Jonathan was not there, and I think it was obvious. We can make paper business jokes all we want, but I do think it was obvious why Jonathan was not there at the press conference today. And here's why I think it was obvious. It's obvious because Robert Kraft was going to take the heat. Robert Kraft was going to take the heat. He was going to tell Patriots fans, this is on me. And I thought that Kraft's opening statement was tremendous. Here's what he said. This whole situation is on me. I feel terrible for Jerod. I put him in an untenable situation. He needed more time before taking the job. In the end, I'm a fan of this team first. Now I have to go out and find a coach that can get us back to the playoffs and hopefully championships. Kraft, from second one, takes 100% accountability. I screwed this up. He mentioned how Jerod needed more time. I screwed this up. I put Jerod in a terrible position. I put him in a situation that he could not survive, and that's on me. And I absolutely love when an owner takes accountability. It's why I can't stand the fact that John Henry doesn't speak to the media. Every once in a while, he'll send off an email, his busy little index fingers, and hit send, but he doesn't want to sit in front of the media, and he doesn't take accountability. John Henry, actually, the last time we heard from him, he was pointing fingers at the fans, not understanding, right? Not being patient enough. Robert didn't do that today. He stood up at the podium, and he told us, this is on me. I screwed up. This is on me. The buck stops with me, and the buck does stop with ownership. I think Kraft's opening statement could not have been better. I thought it was terrific. I thought it showed some humility. And from yesterday to the point of firing Jerod Mayo to today's opening statement, you have seen an owner put his ego aside and say, I screwed this up. And it's time for me to fix it. Now, will he fix it? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I thought the opening statement was a fantastic opening statement for Robert Kraft. It was short, to the point, direct, and he said exactly what he should have said. This is on me. Nobody else. Don't look around. Don't try to find somebody else that this is on. It starts at the top, and he didn't get into the process or the lack of process 10, 11 months ago, but obviously that's what he's talking about. When he says he put Mayo in an untenable situation, and he says that Jerod wasn't ready for the gig, it all goes into what this team did not do during last offseason. And I was happy to see Robert Kraft take the accountability, take it on the chin, and say, I screwed up. All right, let's move on. Why is Mayo gone? Simple, 2 words. No improvement. That's what Robert said today. What wasn't right? What caught his attention? He said, quote, the main thing for me is I felt like we regressed. The high point for me was winning the Cincinnati game. Mid-season, I just think we started to regress. I said that yesterday, didn't I? I said it on yesterday's podcast. The fact that the best game that we saw from this coaching staff, the high point of the season from Jerod Mayo, was week 1. Week 1 was the best. And then when you got to the midway point, it got worse. When you got to the bye week, it got worse, leading to that humiliating performance, quote unquote, against the Chargers. And Robert said the same thing today. He said the same exact thing. The high point for Kraft was winning in Cincinnati. From that point moving forward, it didn't get any better. It might have, for Robert, kind of steadied a little bit for a little while. But as he said, mid-season, I just think we started to regress. The team performance wasn't there. The coaching wasn't there. I've called it a circus. It was an absolute circus. It was a Barnum and Bailey operation. And Robert saw that. And by the middle of the season, he started to see it get even worse. Week after week, it got worse to him. Just not enough improvement. So why not let Mayo, Chris Gasper asked this, why not let Mayo get experience here going in knowing this was a multi-year process? Kraft said we had a rough year last year, going through 2 years like that and then seeing where we were this year, especially the second half. So again, he highlights the second half of the season. The second half of the season is what did it for Robert Kraft. He had seen enough after the second half of this season. Especially the second half just made me feel like we weren't going in the right direction. I can't go through this next year. I mean, Kraft sounded as frustrated as many of us have sounded. I am not going to go through this another year. How many times did we say that over the last couple of weeks? You can't do this again. You can't go through this again. You just cannot. You can't do it. It's insanity. If you bring this back, there's no guarantee it's going to get better. You bring this back in the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of 2025 season, looks like what we've seen the last month, it is going to be misery times 1,000. And the owner stood up there and told us that very thing. I can't go through this again. I can't go through it. Kraft said, we're going to do what we need to do to fix it. It wasn't about wins and losses. It was never about wins and losses. I've said that all year long. It was never about how many games this team was going to win. I predicted 5 wins. Many of you predicted 5 wins or less. Maybe some of you thought 6 wins. Maybe some of you thought 7 wins. I said it was a high ceiling of 7 wins. If everything, and I meant everything, went right, you could win 7 games this year. I had them at 5 wins. It was never about the wins and the losses. I've said it on Twitter at Nick C Radio. I've said it at Blue Sky. I've said it on the radio, and I've said it here. It was never about the wins and the losses. It was about the lack of improvement. It was about the lack of direction. It was about the lack of leadership. When you're looking on the field, off the field, everything was getting off the rails. And by the end of the season, with Jelani Tavai going on the radio, telling fans what they should be doing and not doing, with some of the other guys in that locker room doing the same damn thing, it had gotten to the point where it was a joke. And so it wasn't the fact that they won 4 games. If I keep hearing people say, and it's not a lot of people, I think most people agree with this decision by Kraft, but if I have to hear anybody else tell me, well, what did you expect? What did you expect with a roster like that? It wasn't about wins and losses. It was about competence. Things that you have control of. I've gone through my list with all of you. There were plenty of things. There was a long list of things that Jerod Mayo could control that had nothing to do with talent, and he fell short in every single one of them. That's what this was about. If you say the first week of the season is the high point, that's a problem, folks. All right, I'll get to the front office in a minute because I know a lot of people are talking about the front office. They're talking about Eliot Wolf. Before I hit some super chats, I remind you, help us out. Again, yesterday was the biggest podcast in this channel's history since beginning in September of 2023, and it's because all of you are continuing to help us grow. And you do that by clicking that thumbs up button on the YouTube channel. When you watch this video, you click that thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm. Throwing your comments in. How do you feel about Robert Kraft? Did you think the way I thought about that opening statement? I thought it was a tremendous opening statement, taking the accountability, saying it's all on me. I want your thoughts. So don't forget to click that thumbs up. Don't forget to comment. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. We had somewhat of a jump in subscriptions yesterday. Let's continue that momentum. Subscribe, click that notify bell. We're trying to get to 5,500 subscribers. All right, let's go to a couple super chats before I get to the front office and Eliot Wolf. Antonio Benito, I went from hopeful to dismayed as soon as Kraft said Wolf is staying and is involved in the hiring of the head coach. I am not going to lose my mind just yet about this, Antonio. And I think some people might be getting a little too far ahead of themselves regarding Eliot Wolf. I'll get into it in just a couple of minutes. I know that people are having some anxiety. I know people are frustrated. I will go through my thoughts. I know people were angry yesterday. As soon as we saw that Jerod Mayo was fired, people wanted Eliot Wolf's head on a platter within 5 minutes of that statement being released by Robert Kraft. So I will try to get into what I think regarding Eliot Wolf, what I think is happening here. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for the 5, Antonio. Nikki Hustle, let's go. Charlie, thank you for the 10. Thank you for supporting this program as you have. Vitalix with the $20 super chat. And if you want to jump to the front of the line with your comments, your questions, throw me a super chat and you'll be able to do that. Do you think there is a behind-the-scenes handshake between the Krafts and Vrabel with Vrabel's picture change on Twitter? Yes, the old avatar picture change, right? Just throwing ish at the wall here. I don't know if it's gone as far as a handshake deal. I think it's obvious what Mike Vrabel did over the past couple of weeks. I think it's obvious that after the Arizona game, Vrabel planted some things out there about him being interested in the Patriots job. Then they had the Buffalo game. They went into Buffalo. They played well for the first half at least. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Vrabel stuff following that Buffalo Bills game in Buffalo, the Vrabel stuff seemed to quiet down. I also don't think it's a coincidence that following that humiliating loss against the Chargers, everything Vrabel ramped up. Everything Vrabel became point number one again, right? Vrabel got out of the Cleveland contract. Vrabel was interviewing with the New York Jets just a few days before the final home game of Jerod Mayo's first season as the head coach. Vrabel had this big article in The Athletic talking about what he has learned and how he's improved while he's been in Cleveland, how he's working on the offensive side of the football. I don't think any of that is a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence at all. Tony Pauline's story in Sportskeeda coming out last week, right? That Mike Vrabel, his number one job on his list was the New England Patriots. That being reported like 5 days or so out from the final game of Jerod Mayo's first season, I don't think any of that was coincidental. I think it was calculated by Mike Vrabel. And it could be calculated because Vrabel wants the New England job, and I do think he would take the job. Or it could just be Vrabel trying to build his own market and getting that stuff out there to put pressure on the Jets. Then the Jets have to interview him. As soon as the Jets interview him, now he puts pressure on the Patriots to make the call on Jerod Mayo. I 100% believe that Vrabel did all of that on purpose. I also think there have been some conversations between Vrabel and the Patriots. Has it been between Robert and Mike? I don't know. But I feel like agents have conversations all the time behind closed doors, and I would just have to guess that Mike Vrabel's agent, his representation, they've had some conversations with the Patriots, with the Krafts, or somebody who works for the Krafts. So, yeah, I think they've absolutely been in contact. I think they were in contact before today or yesterday. I think that they were looking at Vrabel as their number one option before starting a process. And I think they felt pretty confident that Vrabel would be interested in the gig. Thanks, Vitalix, for the 20. Ryan jumps in, $10 super chat. Thank you, Ryan. Love the show. Are you surprised Kraft admitted today that the new head coach will have input on the future of the roster and coaching staff? All signs seem to be pointing to Vrabel. I wasn't too surprised because I think if you're Kraft, you're now trying to sell this job, right? And everybody wants at least some level of control. I don't think it's a football czar kind of situation like Belichick was, but Ben Johnson is going to ask how much input he's going to have. We'll get to Ben Johnson later on. Vrabel is certainly going to ask how much input he has. This is how it usually works as far as the coaching staff. You know, the coaching staff should be the head coach's call. And that was a major problem with Jerod Mayo from day one. We talked about it months and months ago. Mayo had zero Rolodex. He didn't have anybody to go to. And that's why they were interviewing linebackers coaches from Boston College. They were, interviewing guys from like Eastern Carolina who were position coaches. It's why Eliot Wolf had to get involved and bring in Alex Van Pelt. Mayo had just very, very limited resources when it came to his own staff, and that was his own fault. That was his own fault because he didn't make enough connections. He didn't build a big enough network. He wanted to stay here in New England. He buttered up Kraft, and he knew that he was in line to get this gig. So he did not go out there in the football world, shake hands, kiss babies, make friends, and build a Rolodex. So the coaching staff is almost always the head coach's call unless the head coach doesn't have people to call upon. If it's going to be somebody like Mike Vrabel, for example, Mike Vrabel has a list. I am absolutely sure of it that Mike Vrabel has a list of names that he wants to bring in. He has his OC, his DC. He's got position coaches. I would imagine that when he sits down with the Krafts, he's going to put all of that on the table and say, this is what I would do. This is who I'm bringing in. This is why I'm bringing them in. This is what they have done in their past. The roster, coaches always have input on the roster. Now, how much of the final say will they have? I don't know. Might depend on who the head coach is. If it's Vrabel, you might give him more say because of his experience. Greg Fields, $20 super chat. Thank you, Greg. Why stick with Wolf? Agree that Kraft did a good mea culpa. Congrats on the views. Well, I appreciate you. And thank you for watching, Greg. And thank you for the $20 super chat. Why stick with Wolf? All right, let's get into Eliot Wolf. Let's get into Eliot Wolf right now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Help a brother out. I'll get back to some of those other super chats in a few minutes, but I want to get to Wolf because a lot of you want to know about Wolf. Walking away from the press conference today, I would not blame any of you if you're confused as to what the hell is going on with Eliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith. It was confusing. And I think some of that has to do with Robert Kraft's delivery, right? I think sometimes his delivery, he doesn't always hit the mark. There's a little bit of rambling from time to time. There is his voice. He trails off every once in a while. So I understand why you would walk away from that press conference confused and wondering what is going on. Why is Eliot Wolf still here? Why is he making these calls? So here's what was said. Who will be involved in the head coach interviews? What traits are you looking for in a head coach? And Robert said we'll have Alonzo Highsmith and Eliot be involved. So right off the bat, Eliot Wolf, Alonzo Highsmith are going to help during this coaching search. Now, I would not freak out about that because Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft, and I know some of you will say Robin Glazer and throw that shot. I understand. But Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft should be leaning on football people. And whether you agree with Eliot Wolf and what he's done, and again, he failed this offseason, there's no doubt. But you have Eliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith in the room to ask certain questions that Jonathan and Robert might not ask. Now, you could go outside of the organization and bring somebody in. I'll get to that a little bit later. But you do want football people in there, right? We also don't know how extensive. We don't know how extensive Highsmith and Wolf, their roles will be within this process. They could be just handling a lot of the logistics. They could be handling, let's set this guy up for this interview. Let's set him up for this interview on this day at this time. They might be doing a lot of the administrative stuff to go along with asking certain questions that Jonathan and Robert might not be thinking of asking, right? So just because they're involved in the search doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be here for the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. We don't know specifically what role they will have within that coaching search. So then So then we got the personnel department question. What will happen with the personnel department? Here's what Robert Kraft said. We will wait until we bring that coach in. He's obviously going to have big input on who the players are, who the coaches are. So again, Robert didn't answer it the best he could have answered it. This is what you got to deal with at times, right? He did not answer it the best that he could have answered it, but he began the answer with, we'll wait until we bring that coach in. To me, that's Kraft telling us that whoever comes in as the head coach is going to have significant say within the program, and that absolutely includes the front office. I don't think Robert Kraft is going to go out there today and tell us that Eliot Wolf is gone because he doesn't know what's going to happen. He doesn't know what the head coach is going to want. And I don't think he's going to sit there and say that Eliot Wolf is going to be the final shot caller. We did not hear that today. We heard that they're going to still be here for the time being. But you can't fire everybody because you do need certain people in positions. And I heard Felger talk about this earlier today, and he's 100% right. You have the scouting department. You have scouts that have been working on these scouting reports. All the people that have done the legwork over the past year about this draft class. You need that intel. You need that information. You cannot just take everybody and bring them to this front office. Like if you are somebody, let's say Mike Borgonzi, who we'll talk about a little bit later, the assistant GM of the Chiefs. If you're Mike Borgonzi and you get brought in, okay, let's say hypothetically the Patriots hire Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel tells Robert Kraft, I want Mike Borgonzi to be my right-hand man in the front office. If you bring in Borgonzi, Borgonzi cannot bring his entire staff along with him because usually front office, they sign contracts through the drafts. So it's not like you can just pluck everybody. Now, when contracts come up, you can bring other people from that front office along with Borgonzi. If you want to promote certain individuals, you can bring somebody in. This is why Eliot Wolf last year brought in Alonzo Highsmith. He could bring Highsmith in because Highsmith was working with the University of Miami. He didn't have an NFL job, so he could go get his right-hand man and bring Highsmith in without much issue. But right now, it's a timing problem. It's a contractual problem. And if you bring somebody in like the Washington Commanders brought in Adam Peters didn't bring an entire staff with him. So right now you have that infrastructure, and it doesn't matter if you hate what they did in the draft, none of that matters. I'm just telling you it's a person problem. You can't go out there and hire an entire front office in January when you've got free agency coming up in March, when you've got the combine coming up in a month and a half. You can't go out there and build the front office from scratch. You just can't do it. You need people that are here right now to take the reins, to pick up the phone, to make phone calls, not to make deals, but at least right now, make sure that you're keeping the ship afloat. You can't just go out there and hire an entire front office. It doesn't work that way. So to me, it seems like the head coach will pick. Whoever gets brought in as the head coach will have major say in how things are going to go. Who's going to be the guy with, who's going to help, right? Who's the GM they want to work with? If it's Vrabel and he wants Borgonzi, or he wants Ryan Cowden, who is, in New York right now, was with him in Tennessee, the head coach is going to get his guy. If Robert Kraft wants his man is going to get what he wants. If you want to hire Mike Vrabel is going to say, this is the guy I want to work with. And if you don't bring that guy in, I'm going to be uncomfortable. So at the end of all of it, whoever Vrabel or Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or whoever else interviews for the job, I believe they will have the final say as far as who they want to work with. And Robert Kraft will inevitably follow that. Eliot Wolf might still be here, but he'll be in the front office. He will not have, the end of the day say in all of it. He won't be, stamping his approval on picks. Alonzo Highsmith might still be here, but they will be in roles, I would imagine, lower than whoever comes in with the head coach. unless the head coach comes out and says, hey, look, I love Eliot Wolf. I love Eliot Wolf. And I want to work with Eliot Wolf. I want Eliot Wolf to be my guy. Well, if Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, anybody else, Brian Flores, any name you want to throw out there, if that's their opinion, then you do that. Because we've talked about this since Mayo was promoted. You need a head coach and a GM to trust each other, work with each other, all of those things. You have a shotgun marriage. You've got two guys that haven't worked with each other. It could be an utter disaster, right? If you come in, you don't like that guy or you don't trust that guy, it's going to be a mess. So I think whoever interviews for the head coach job, whoever gets that job, will ultimately have the say in who they want to work with, and whoever that person is going to be will end up having the autonomy. That's what I feel. This is what happens in a lot of front offices, folks. This is what happens to a lot of coaching staffs. A lot of times a head coach gets popped. The staff kind of lingers. The front office kind of lingers until you pick your head coach or your next GM, and then things start rolling. Now, Kraft said, again, I understand why people will be frustrated or confused by some of this. He was asked about if Eliot and his staff is going to continue. Will the coaching hire impact that? He said, we are looking for people working together. They will be staying on. Again, they will be staying on for now. They will be staying on for now because there has to be certain things done within the franchise that those guys are going to have to do until they find the next head coach. And you can work together but not have the say, right? Eliot Wolf could become the do boy. We don't know. So saying that he wants people working together and that those guys will be staying on, that doesn't mean they're going to be staying on for the long term. And it also doesn't mean that they're going to have the final say on anything. I think it's people's fears and anxiety right now that are in overdrive. So Tom Curran did a great job. He asked a fantastic question about why Wolf and Highsmith would stay. And Kraft said, I think that the department evolved a lot. A lot of things changed. We changed our grading system. But then Robert said, our drafts have not been good for a while. If you want to compete long-term, you got to have good drafts. He also mentioned we may have two quarterbacks. A lot of people talked about that. I don't think that's big of a deal. I think we'll hopefully see a big improvement this year. Again, I don't think, and this is me, and I could end up being wrong, I don't think Robert Kraft is telling us that Eliot Wolf is going to keep his power within this organization no matter what. I don't think that, because that would be a strategic misfire on a crazy level. Because if Kraft is saying that, then a head coach that wants to come in and wants to have say as far as who he's going to work with, you pretty much just alienated that guy. I don't think Kraft has any idea. I think he's got to sit down with the head coaching candidates, and he's got to talk to them, and he's got to get a feel as to who they want to work with, what their list of names are, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my take. My guess is that for the time being, Eliot Wolf and Highsmith will stay, but I do not think they're going to have the full autonomy that people think they're going to have. I do not believe Wolf and Highsmith have earned the right to call the shots after this past offseason. I think the head coach will get his guy. And I think the head coach and the guy that he wants will inevitably make the calls. All right. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We have a lot more to get to. Latest on the coaching search. Some names have surfaced. We want to get back to the Kraft press conference as well. Still more to get through with that. Let's jump to Chris Chapman, $10 super chat. Thank you, Chris. Nick, how much does the win yesterday hurt us this offseason? It hurts. No doubt it hurts, Chris. I think it was Burt Breer that I saw. He said he went back and he did the homework on the value, the difference of the value between the top pick and the fourth pick. And the difference of the first and fourth pick in the draft was pretty much the number 10 pick. So, yeah, it's going to hurt. Having the number 1 pick overall gave you a lot of different avenues, a lot of different options that you could choose. You could trade down, get a bunch of draft capital, and then you're making more deals and doing different things. So, yeah, it's going to hurt you, but I don't think it cripples you. The number 1 pick overall would have fast-forwarded the process a little bit, but I don't think having the 4th pick is the end of the world, okay? Because the 4th pick is still going to be a very good pick, because the fact is you don't need a quarterback. So yes, it would have been nice, and it hurt, and it does hurt, and it will hurt. But you still have the 4th pick. Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are likely going to go 1-2 in whichever order, which leaves you with the 2nd pick, which leaves you with having, if not the best player available on your board, at least the 2nd best player available on your board. And there could still be trades. Like, who goes number 3? Is Travis Hunter there at number 4? If Travis Hunter is there at number 4, do you draft Travis Hunter, or does some other team want to overpay to move up to draft Hunter? There's a lot of different things that could still happen. Having the 4th pick in the draft is still a very good thing. It's not as good as having the 1st pick, and you would rather have the 1st pick, but it's not the oh my God, this offseason is ruined. The Patriots have, I think it's 4 picks out of the top 77. They have 5 picks in the top 105. So they still have some really good draft capital. They have 2 third-round picks thanks to the Matthew Judon trade, one of the things that Eliot Wolf got right. That was a great trade. You have that 3rd-round pick from Atlanta, which I think is 77th. Your 3rd-round pick is 69, so you've got 2 picks that are pretty close, right? So that leaves the door open for you to trade those 2 picks and move up. You can trade one of those picks to try to move back up into the 1st round as a sweetener. So there's still a lot of things that they can do. But there's no doubt it hurt. Derek jumps in, $5 super chat. You might have already said it, but is it weird that we have seen reports that AVP got fired, but not Covington? Okay, so AVP has not been fired. He has not been fired. Nobody from this staff has been fired outside of Jerod Mayo. Robert Kraft said that today. He confirmed it. The staff is still intact. Yesterday, I saw, I think it was 98.5 jump on it. I jumped on it. Unfortunately, that was from Ben Volen. Ben Volen was wrong. It's not the first time he's been wrong. It will not be the last time he will be wrong. So AVP has not been fired. Now, people might believe he's going to get fired, and he could well be on his way out. But as of right now, the staff is intact. And that is not super unusual because, again, whoever you talk to, when you bring in Ben Johnson, you bring in Mike Vrabel, you bring in maybe Liam Cohen from Tampa, you're going to bring those guys in and ask them if there's anybody from the staff that they would like to keep. And those guys, whoever gets picked, will likely want to have conversations with all of them. I'll give you an example. If you're Mike Vrabel, do you at least entertain the idea of keeping AVP here, not as offensive coordinator, but as quarterbacks coach? Would Van Pelt be open to that? I don't know. He might be like, screw that. I'm done. I'm not going from OC to quarterbacks coach. I want to go somewhere else. But if Van Pelt is amenable to the idea of being here as quarterbacks coach, then Vrabel might want to keep him on the staff because he has the experience with Drake Maye. T.C. McCartney has experience with Drake Maye. Maybe Vrabel or whoever else, right? Liam Cohen, Brian Flores, whoever, that prospective head coach talks to T.C. McCartney and he says, you know what? I think this young guy's sharp. I want to keep him around on my staff. So I think the staff so far has not been touched because you will have whoever gets the head coach job, you will have that person speak to some of the staff at least. Jeremy Springer did a good job with special teams, so maybe the new coach wants to keep Springer. So you don't cut bait just yet. Now, if some of these guys, like if Van Pelt feels like he has the inside track on an OC job somewhere else, that's a different conversation. You might cut bait with Van Pelt to let him go and try to get that job. But the entire staff is still here in New England as of today. Eric Griffin, should AVP stay at the bare minimum? To the quarterback coach kind of just asked that, just kind of answered that. Sorry, Eric. Yeah, I mean, look, if AVP wants to stay as quarterbacks coach, I'm in. I think he's done a good job of developing Maye. I think we saw yesterday that Joe Milton, even though Ben McAdoo has a lot to do with Milton's development, I think you look at AVP's career as a quarterback's coach, you see what he's done here in New England. I would not be against that idea at all. I'd love AVP to stay as quarterback's coach. I'd love that idea. Let's go to Jeremy Ramirez, $5 super chat. Thank you, Jeremy. Should we keep Milton as the backup or try to move him for draft capital? Love the show. Well, thank you for the kind words. I think, Jeremy, that right now the plan would be you keep him as QB2. I don't think Brissett wants to be back here. But if you get a phone call and a team is like going goo goo gaga over Joe Milton and wants to trade you like a 3rd-round pick, then I think you have to entertain it. And it'd be very difficult to turn down a 3rd-round pick if that's what you could get for Joe Milton. But if somebody calls with like a 5th-round pick, a 4th-round pick, probably better off keeping Milton. JB Brown, $10 super chat. Props to Kraft for owning the botch job. Took stones. Do a full search, but hire Mike Vrabel. No first-timers, please. Also, Wolf shouldn't be the final say on the draft. Thank you, JB. Again, I don't think Wolf will have the final say in the draft unless the new head coach wants that to be the case. I don't think that would be the case. We'll have to wait and see. But I do think whoever comes in with the head coach will end up, along with the head coach, having that final say. And yes, I agree with you about Kraft. I thought he stood up and did a great job today. That opening statement especially, I thought was a home run. Said everything that you want to hear from your owner. All right, let's get back to some Kraft thoughts, and then we got to keep it moving. Some players skipped media availability. That was a story today we want to get to, and the latest on the head coach search. All right. Here's a big one. Here's a huge one. Kraft promised. He promised me, he promised you that money will not be a problem. Greg Bedard asked, very expensive. You're going to buy out this staff. You have to bring in a new staff. You have a lot of cap space. Will your handling of the coaching staff and the money that you pay to the coaching staff, will that affect anything you spend on the players? And Kraft said, the answer is no. He was clear. He was clear on this one. The answer is no. The money being spent on the coaching staff is not going to impact free agency and the money you spend this offseason. That is straight from Kraft's mouth. He said, we have never told any coach or limited the spending. The only thing we've said is if you exceed the cap, we would like to see it leveled over 3 years so we don't get way out of hand. So what Kraft is saying is we're going to spend on the staff. We're going to spend in free agency. We've never told a coach that they can't spend money. But what we have said is don't spend money year after year after year. Don't go bananas. Don't go to the cap every season because we're going to end up looking like the New Orleans Saints and be in cap jail for a decade. That's what Kraft told us today through the media. He said spending to the cap or above the cap, we want to win. That is our priority. So again, Robert Kraft said clearly the coaching staff money is not going to impact player money and that their number one priority is to win and that they are going to spend to win. He said it clearly today. So he's on record. I mean, there's no wiggle room with that answer. He is on record. If they go into free agency and not spend money, this is going to come back up and Kraft is going to look like a fool. He's going to look like a liar. So Kraft went on record and he was very clear today. Money is not going to be a problem. And I know this might upset some of you, and I understand why. There's no arguing the historical numbers, okay, of the past 20 years, past 10 years, whatever. The Patriots, when it comes to spending, they have been cheap. And I know Felger's done a great job of highlighting this for a long time. And I know a lot of people are frustrated by the lack of spending, and I understand it. My question has always been, is that on the owner or is that on Belichick? Was that a Belichick principle of not overspending on certain guys because he wants to keep everybody at a certain level in the locker room? So that was one of the big questions about this press conference and what Kraft would say. And the historical numbers are there. Again, the Patriots have been the cheapest organization in the NFL for a while. There's no denying that. However, what I would say is I am paying attention to what happens post Bill Belichick, right? Like, what have the Krafts done since Belichick's departure? We could talk about the history. We all agree on the history. But I'm looking at post Belichick, what has Kraft done? Well, so far, Kraft paid Belichick to be fired. He bought out Belichick, and we know that Belichick was making $25 million a year. So I would have to imagine Belichick had all the leverage because he would say, no, I'm just going to sit here with my feet up, right? So he had to pay Belichick a decent chunk. I'd imagine most of that $25 million. He not only had to pay Belichick to buy him out, he also paid Jerod Mayo. And I would imagine that Mayo was making, I don't know, $8 million, $10 million a year. I don't know what it is. But he had to pay both Belichick and he had to pay Mayo to get rid of Belichick. He also, they've added more coaching staff, right? Jerod Mayo's coaching staff was much larger than Belichick's coaching staff, which again is spending money. So you bought out Belichick for a huge chunk. You brought in Mayo for a chunk, and then you added to your staff for more money. Also in 2024, in the offseason, not telling you they did the right thing and who they brought in or whatever, but the Patriots did actually spend last year. Like, I believe the Patriots will spend this offseason because they spent last offseason. And if you don't believe me, just as I said, you can't argue with the numbers of the history and the Patriots being the cheapest organization in football for the past several years. You cannot argue with the numbers as far as what the Patriots did last offseason, and that is spend money. In 2024, they are 8th in total spending. So they're top 10 in total spending. They're second, number 2, in average per year. They are 8th in fully guaranteed money. They are 11th in total guaranteed money. They are 7th in first-year cash. So if you, and also I remind you, they offered Brandon Ayuk $90 million guaranteed. So they are 8th in total spending. They are 2nd in average per year. They're 8th in fully guaranteed money. They're 7th in first-year cash. They're 11th in total guaranteed money since the beginning of 2024. And they offered Ayuk that money. If Ayuk just said yes to that trade and wanted to play for the Patriots, which he did not, but if Ayuk said yes, you look at all of those numbers, the Patriots would have been top 3 in spending across the board since the beginning of 2024. So I'm looking at what has happened since Belichick left, and the Patriots have spent money. So I think they're going to do it again this offseason. I think they are willing to spend. It's just, who do they spend the money on? All right, quickly, the timing. When was the decision made on Jerod Mayo? Kraft said the whole situation evolved, but I'd say over the last month. I went back and forth, and I don't know. In my life and in my business, I make certain decisions, and I know when it's right, and it just happened. I think this began with Arizona. Watching that terrible game post-bye week, I think that started this whole thing, and I think it ended with the Chargers. I think that 40-7 humiliating loss at home with the crowd acting the way they did and what followed, I think that was it for Mayo. I think that was a death knell, the Chargers game. As far as Jerod knowing before the game, did he know he was going to get fired? Kraft said no. And Kraft was very emotional. It was obvious that it was a pretty tough decision to pop Mayo because he was emotional today. RKK also said he did not talk to Mayo before the game on Sunday, yesterday. I know some people are going crazy about that. I know Bill Simmons said, he should sell the team. Listen, he might have said something. He might have not said something. You can indirectly say things. Robert Kraft is not going to sit there up at the podium and tell us that he ordered the code red, because guess what? You can't order the code red. You can't go down to the coach's office and say, I want you to lose this game. You're not going to publicly say that because that's tanking. The NFL is anti-tanking. You'll lose a pick. You'll lose money. So Kraft is never going to tell us. All right, on the coaching search, how big of a search is there going to be? Kraft said we want to interview as many people as we can that we think can help us get to that position that we want to be in. We have put out requests. He said Stacey James, who is the director of communications for the Patriots, will be filling the writers in on that. Somebody asked him if Mike Vrabel was on top of the list. And again, this is something that Robert Kraft is not going to tell you in a press conference. He's not going to stand up there and say, yes, Mike Vrabel's our number one pick. It's just not going to happen. I thought Kraft handled it well. He said, before I make a comment like that, I don't know all the people involved. There are some wonderful people that we've heard about. I'd rather respond to that after I've seen everyone. So that was the Mike Vrabel question. I did think it was interesting that Kraft kept harping on the lack of, time that Mayo had and that he needed more time. That would point me towards an experienced candidate, right? which of course would make you lean towards Mike Vrabel. All right. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more. We've got a lot more. Got to get to the head coaching search. Again, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Those three things help us with the algorithm. Best day of the podcast's history yesterday. Thanks to all of you. All right, some players skipped media availability. This became a story today. Zoe had it on 98.5 that Drake Maye skipped media availability. Several team captains apparently skipped media availability. I have no idea why that is. I think everybody is kind of speculating. I did hear Phil Perry on Zoe and Beetle say that he's chalking it up as a rookie mistake with Maye, and that the people around Drake might not have let him know, like, you should do it. The way Phil Perry explained it, he described it, is that the players were told that they didn't have to do the availability. It was kind of put in their hands. They didn't have to do it. So Phil thinks that Drake made a mistake, thinking, I don't have to do it, so I'm just not going to do it. But he should have done it. And all the leaders of the team should have done it. They should be out there, even if it's uncomfortable. Just like their owner did today, you've got to take accountability for your own work this season. And you got to take those questions. So maybe those guys will be made available at a later date. I don't know. It could be because, certain relationships, maybe Drake doesn't want to talk, or felt like, I don't really need to talk today because of what's going on with Alex Van Pelt. And maybe he's uncomfortable. Maybe he knows Van Pelt's likely gone. So it could be, because of relationships with certain coaches. He could be, pissed about, the change. Some guys feel like it's not the appropriate time. Maybe they felt uncomfortable talking about Mayo getting fired and didn't want to talk about it. But again, it's not good. Guys have to talk, including Drake. And the team probably should have said, yeah, you guys should hang around and talk to the media. And I guess that wasn't the message to the players. So we'll see if those guys are made available over the next few days. All right, I want to jump to something else, which is the head coaching search. The latest on that, Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel. Want to get into that. But first, Terry jumps in with a $100 super chat, a tremendous, outstanding, as Rob D puts, contribution. Thank you, Terry, for the incredible generosity. Nick, congratulations on your most successful podcast and the up-to-the-minute news. Buckled up for a wild offseason. Yes, we should absolutely be buckled up. We got a head coach search to get through. We're going to have an entire coaching staff get hired again. I think we're going to have additions to the front office. We obviously have the combine coming up in February. We'll have all the draft talk and all the big boards and all the pundits, right? We will talk about, of course, free agency. We'll do a ton. Of free agent talk. So a lot of things to look forward to. The next 5 months, I think, going to be the best months of this podcast. Hopefully all of you are here to hang around, chill out, enjoy it. But Terry, thank you for the $100 super chat. Again, the incredible generosity means the world to me. And glad you are doing well. Glad you are doing well with that knee surgery. All right, let's get to the latest on the coach search. Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do if I were Robert Kraft. I would, hire a consultant. I would hire a consultant who doesn't have a history with Eliot Wolf or Alonzo Highsmith. I would hire that consultant to do a full vetting process. And Tom Curran brought this up. Michael McCann, lawyer, brought it up to Tom. Tom talks about the football overlord, consultant, overlord, whatever. I would bring somebody in, and I would allow that person to interview Wolf, Highsmith, the front office. I would have that person also sit down and speak with the coaching staff that is still here. Again, if you're just joining us, the coaching staff is still here. Nobody outside of Mayo has been fired yet. That's been confirmed by a bunch of people, including Robert Kraft himself. I would have that consultant sit down with the staff and go through what happened this last season. What went right? What went wrong? What do you think this organization can do better for the coaching staff, for the players? I would hire a consultant, and I would have that consultant go through a full vetting process of the current staff at Gillette Stadium, front office and coaching staff. I would then have that consultant in on the interviews with these head coach candidates. Eliot Wolf, Alonzo Highsmith, if they want to be involved, fine, but I would have a consultant in there to help lead that process. Now, maybe you're concerned about Eliot Wolf leaving. I would not be concerned about that if I were Robert Kraft. I would bring in this consultant, and this consultant would, in essence, do what a hiring search firm does. So that's what I would do. Apparently, according to Burt Breer, the Krafts are not going to hire a search firm. They are going to be running point. And as Robert said today, Eliot Wolf and Highsmith will be helping run the operation as far as logistics and all that stuff. I wouldn't do that. I would not do that. I would bring in a consultant, and I would let the consultant do that with the Krafts. But I also understand that there's a balance here, because if you go out and you say Eliot Wolf, you're going to be second in control, what happens if he and Highsmith are like, bleep you? I'd say you have the consultant. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. Let's get to the coaches. Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, the Patriots requested an interview with Johnson. I think this is a great first step. I think it's a great first request because, number one, Ben Johnson is the top name. Ben Johnson is one of the top names. As we know, he's been a top name the last couple of hiring cycles. So to go out there and request an interview with Ben Johnson is a smart move. It's a top name. I also think it tells us that this is a legit process because Ben Johnson, according to multiple reports, he will interview with the Patriots. And I don't want you to overlook that. I don't want anybody to overlook that Ben Johnson is going to take this interview. Ben Johnson has been very, very picky as far as where he's going to go, who he's comfortable working for. He has turned down job offers before. He has turned down a bunch of interviews before. If he doesn't feel like the job is sexy enough, he ain't going to take an interview. Ben Johnson doesn't take interviews just to take interviews. That's not what he does. So the fact that Ben Johnson is taking this interview with the Patriots, that's great news because it tells us that this job opening is coveted. And that's not somebody with Patriots rose-colored glasses. If Ben Johnson is taking this interview, it means he is legitimately interested, which means you have one of the top candidates in this hiring cycle interested in coming here to New England. And that's big news. That's significant. That is very significant. Makes me feel great about who they might be able to get and that we're not just, throwing out these names hoping that they'll be interested. No, Ben Johnson is going to take this interview. Mike Vrabel is going to take an interview. So the two top candidates that many would say are out there are going to take an interview with you, which tells you this is a job that they're interested in. And if things fall together, they would take this gig. It's a coveted opening. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Drake Maye, the quarterback, the cap space, the draft capital, the new facility that's going to be built for 2026, all of those things. And no matter how people feel about how Kraft has mishandled things over the past couple of years, Kraft is still a respected owner. And when you compare him to other owners in the league, he's much more respected. So the Ben Johnson interview to me is not something that we just gloss over. He's a top candidate. He's a legit name. I don't think Ben Johnson is taking this interview with the Patriots if he thinks this is just for show, right? It would make him look bad. Because if he doesn't get the job, then it's like, oh, he didn't get the job. Well, what was wrong with Ben Johnson? So I don't think Johnson takes this interview if he thinks that this is just a fakakta process, a sham, some kind of, fake interview. He's taking it because he's interested. So I think that says a lot about this process so far, which is great because last year was a circus. It was ridiculous. It was an excuse. You really didn't have one last year, right? This is good. This is good. You're getting the real names. You're interviewing the real people. Get them all, the top candidates. Get the top 5, 10 candidates and go through these interviews. Go through the process. So I thought that was great. There are lots of reports out there about Mike Vrabel being the top candidate. This is not surprising. We've talked about Vrabel for the last few weeks. I wanted the Patriots to hire Vrabel instead of promoting Mayo. So I'm not really shocked that Mike Vrabel is a top candidate for this gig. Mike Giardi tweeted out that he spoke to a half a dozen league executives, and they all agreed that Vrabel is going to end up being the guy. Again, you still go through the process. I don't have a problem with people believing that Vrabel is going to be the guy, because in every job, in every search you do, you have your list of people. That's what you do. That's what people who are hiring others, that's what they do. That's what I did when I was program director of a Sacramento sports radio station. I had to hire my co-host in the afternoons. I had my list of people. It didn't mean that my mind was made up. It didn't mean that it was going to happen, that my person on the top of the list was going to be the person that I chose. You go through the interview process, because if Ben Johnson knocks your socks off, then you might sit there and go, you know what? That was a really impressive interview. This guy's done a great job in Detroit. He can take care of our quarterback, our young quarterback. So maybe he leapfrogs Vrabel. Every time people get interviewed for a job, you have to know there's a favorite. Just nobody goes in thinking everybody is on a level playing field. You always have a favorite. You always have a list of, like, here's my top 3, my top 5, my top 10. So going through the process helps you, because if Ben Johnson hits a home run, you might change your mind. If Liam Cohen hits a home run, you might change your mind. Brian Flores, if you bring these guys in, right, and they interview, and I would bring them in. I'd bring Cohen in. I'd bring Ben Johnson in. I'd bring Vrabel in. I'd bring Cohen in. I'd bring all the names that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. And I would have conversations with every single one of them. And if somebody absolutely knocked my shoes or socks off, I might say, oh, yes, I went in thinking that Vrabel was going to be the guy, but man, oh man, was Aaron Glenn incredible. Right? Like, man, that was an incredible interview. And at the same time, maybe Mike Vrabel bombs the interview. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's why you've got to have a process. Like, imagine if the Patriots actually interviewed Jerod Mayo for the job they gave him. I would have to imagine that if they did this last year, and they ruined it by having the succession language in the contract, but if they had this, an honest-to-goodness process, and they brought in Mike Vrabel and they brought in Jerod Mayo for interviews, you probably would walk away saying, yeah, Vrabel is certainly ready. Jerod is certainly not ready. You can bring Vrabel in, and what if he bombs the interview? What if Vrabel tells you that he wants more say in the personnel than you're comfortable with? What if Vrabel wants to call all the shots? So you've got to go through this process. You've got to interview the people. You go through the top candidates. So Ben Johnson being the first name that surfaced along with Vrabel, that's a fantastic sign to me that they're going to actually interview legitimate candidates, which is great. But back to Vrabel again. Giardi says half a dozen league execs believe Vrabel's going to be the guy. I think GM names, if you're talking Vrabel, because we don't really have this information with Ben Johnson just yet. Trust me, I'm going to dig in to all of these guys and their histories. And as this goes along, we'll talk about possible front office people and possible coordinators. For Vrabel, we have done some of that, right? Because of last year, he was in the process, or should have been in the process. Ryan Cowden brought his name up earlier. Tennessee, New York Giants. He has a link with Vrabel. Mike Borgonzi, who's a local guy from Everett. He's from Everett, Massachusetts. He's the Kansas City assistant GM. He is certainly a name. He was with Vrabel in Kansas City when Vrabel got traded there. So I would look at Mike Borgonzi as a possibility. So I'm excited. I'm excited about this process because it feels like they are talking to people that, matter and that are highly regarded. And that's what I want to see. That's what I want when we look at, okay, who do you have? Who do you have on your list? Like if you're bringing in a bunch of, I don't know, random dudes, right? How good would you feel about that? Oh, the Patriots requested an interview for, Shippy McGee from frickin' the Chargers, who happens to be the running backs coach. It's like, really? Shippy McGee, running backs coach? Why are you interviewing that guy? No. Give me the Ben Johnsons. Give me the Mike Vrabels. Give me the Liam Cohens. Give me the Aaron Glens. Give me the Brian Floreses. Give me the legitimate dudes. Okay? The legitimate dudes. Give me a list of those guys, interview them all, and pick the best one. If you land on Vrabel, fine with it, because that's where I am looking at right now. If I were making the hire today, I'd hire Vrabel. Now, if we hear some things over the next couple of weeks that Vrabel wants more power, blah, 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 that might change. But I'm happy. I'm happy with the process so far. We're a day in. But so far, you know, again, we addressed the Wolf stuff earlier in the podcast and the Highsmith stuff earlier. The fact that Robert Kraft fired Mayo yesterday right after the game and showed that decisiveness and swallowed his pride and made the right move in my estimation, that was a good thing. Robert Kraft taking full accountability today at the podium, saying that was on me, is a good thing. The fact that he came out and told us unequivocally they're going to spend money, it's not going to get in the way, is a good thing. Going through this process, hearing the names of Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel, and I'm sure we'll hear more names, more legitimate names, is a good thing. So far, we're only about 24 hours. We're like 23 hours post Mayo getting fired. But so far, there's not a ton of bad, right? There's not a lot of bad. All right, a couple more notes before we go. One non-head coach note. David Andrews told the media today that he wants to return for 2025. That's good news, obviously. David Andrews is a good center. How does that change the trajectory of Cole Strange? I don't know. But look, the way this offensive line was, I'll take all the good offensive linemen that I can get. So David Andrews says he wants to return. He plans on returning. He expects to return. He did say that Drake Maye kind of, made it more likely that he would be back and wanted him to be back. So Drake Maye, working with Drake Maye, fantastic stuff. Some non-Pats news. Brian Daboll. If you were looking for Brian Daboll to be the OC, that ain't going to happen. The New York Giants have decided to keep Joe Shane, the GM, and they are keeping Daboll as their head coach. So Brian Daboll not touching the market. He will not be available for you. So if you're looking at offensive coordinator names, you can officially put a Sharpie through the name of Brian Daboll. That OC vision has died quickly. All right, it's been a long one today. I knew it was going to be a long one today because we have a lot to cover. And as I've said, we're going to cover all of it. We have so much to do over the next 5 months. It might be overwhelming for some. It is fun for me. I couldn't even sleep this morning. Honestly, I couldn't wait to talk about this. So we've got a lot. I mean, we've got the head coach to figure out what happens in the front office, free agency, draft. It's going to be busy. Anything big happens, it's breaking news. It's not on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We are going to be here to break it. I don't care. It could be at 11:30 at night. I will be here to break it. So thanks for everybody joining us today. I appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're back on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern live right here on YouTube. Till then, see you.